Today in America, roughly 12,000 babies will be born. Most will grow up with a full shot at the American dream. But on any given day across our nation, 2,500 children experience severe neglect or abuse. Nearly 1 million a year.
I can remember being tied up as a little girl, sitting in a chair, hands tied up, legs tied up.
Janetta McSwain lives in Atlanta with her sons Jaleel and Rashad. Her childhood was spent in Birmingham, Alabama, where she and her sister Sonia were abused by 3 uncles while in the care of their grandmother.
Moving from Birmingham, Alabama and going back home over the years has been an eye-opener. Has showed me this is what you left. Why didn't you leave earlier? Passing my old neighborhood, I began to realize what I had left. I began to see the destruction. My grandmother would go fishing a lot. She loved to go fishing, and she would leave me and my sister, who was 6. I was 5, and I had a boy cousin who was 5. The abuse started with my uncles sitting us in chairs, maybe 3 chairs in the living room. They would lock all the doors.
Whoop us, beat us. We used to try to run outside, they still beat us. And they,
I can remember my panties as a little girl being ripped off and your clothes ripped off. It was just so brutal. And I couldn't understand why would somebody in your blood, your relatives, do that to you. And having a boy cousin, watching a boy, you know, being molested and penetrated, it was just horrific. It was horrific to go through. And this happened for years.
Janetta contracted syphilis as a result of the sexual abuse. Threatened by her uncles, she never told about the abuse.
I was so afraid, so I didn't tell anyone, because the fear that was put in me. Another thing was my mother was gone so much, and coming from a parent who didn't want me, who also emotionally abused me, why should I tell? Who cared? You know, who cared?
Jeanette Madison is the mother of Janetta and Sonia. She was sexually abused by her father as a child.
That was me and my sister Gertrude, and we slept in the same bed. And I can remember, you know, I always wanted to sleep over by the window, because the bed was pushed up to the wall at the window. I wanted to sleep by the window, so crawling hand that night, you know, couldn't find me.
The abuse from my mother, I think, was the worst. I wish I never had you. I wish I'd have left you in the bushes. I wish I'd flushed you down the commode. When my mother would come home, it was like the most fearful thing, that you better go in the other room. She may throw dishes, she may break dishes. She was a very, very bitter woman.
By the time Janetta and Sonia were 9 and 10 years old, their mother was a chronic drinker who entertained men in her home.
she would get drunk and let them come to our house and let them spend the night with us while she drunk in her room. They'd come in our room and do what they want to do while she laying in her bed with another man.
We knew they were coming in to get us, so we would lay in the bed together because we knew the door was going to open and we knew one of us was going to get taken out of the room. And one night, my uncle came in, and she begged him to take her instead of me.
By the time they were teenagers, Janetta and Sonia were in trouble.
I started hanging in the streets, started meeting the wrong kind of men. I dropped out of high school in 11th grade. I stopped caring about going to school. My mother dropped out. Everybody in my family dropped out, so it was a cycle. And at that point in my life, it wasn't a problem doing anything I had to do. It wasn't a problem. I had already been violated and raped. So I didn't have any essence about myself. I didn't know how to be a lady. Wasn't taught how to be a lady. And I met the first person that came along. I got pregnant the first 2 or 3 times we were together, and he left, said it wasn't his baby. Bam, I'm a single mother now.
Repeating their mother's pattern, both sisters had unwanted children by their late teens. But there was one difference between Janetta and Sonia.
I've never done drugs, but I have done everything other than drugs. But that was one of my rock bottoms that I wasn't going to do.
I did everything for crack. People don't want to tell people their story when they got on drugs. I did everything it was to get drugs. I robbed, I stole, I prostituted, honey. I was down to 98 pounds. I had no breasts, I had no behind. You can see my ribs. I was jumping in the cars. I had guns put to my head. I had knives put to me. I slept in abandoned houses. I slept in abandoned cars. I was eating sometimes maybe once a week.
It was so traumatic for me. We were 11 months apart. It's to see her. I think that was the hardest part of my life. It's to see her throw her life away.
Over the next few years, Janetta worked small jobs and had a second son named Jaleel. There were men in her life, but the relationships didn't last.
There have been times it's that you go there, you have flashbacks, you know? It's somebody ripping something off of you, and you know how ugly and nasty and degraded that makes you feel?
While Sonia remained stuck in anger, Janetta moved on. After months of studying, she took the GED test.
But I missed it by 1 point. And thank God I went back the next day, the next week, and retook it. And I was the only one there out of 30 students. I was the only one that showed back that day. And I think even then, that part of my life is that I wanted something.
By the time she turned 30, Janetta had an awakening.
I looked at my boys and I said, are there going to be a rapist? Are they going to molest their kids? Because at that time, I realized every man in my family that I knew had touched me inappropriately. So I knew then that this is a cycle. And I said to myself, I'm going to break this cycle. Didn't know at that time, never heard about a cycle. Just knew that I was in one. Knew that I didn't want to continue to be like my mother. And knew that I didn't want my 2 male boys to grow up and be a statistic. They want them to be in jail. They want them on the corner selling dope. They want them to get caught up and somebody offer them dope and say, hey, you know, sell this and bring me your money. I didn't want that. I didn't want them to be looked down upon. I didn't want them to be ashamed of me. I owed them something else.